All right. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to welcome you here, Ben. We've been looking at your work, and the students have been kind of asking to get to know you. And I think you guys just hired one of our students over there at Hi-Rez. So that's awesome.
Oh, we probably did. We've been going through a lot of we've been hiring a lot of people over there, so we probably got a couple.
Yeah, that's great. Tell me, that might be a great place for us to start here because, we hear all this stuff in the game industry that like it's, so hard to get a job. And then like, sometimes students come in with
Hmm.
stories like, you have a better chance of getting in the NFL than you do, becoming a character artist, right?
It's
By,
it's very similar.
yeah. So, but you're hiring a lot of people now. How does this work? When do you fire, ramp up? Like, what advice can you give people who just don't know what the heck is going on?
So as far as the hiring, firing stuff, where I'm at, we're kind of a major studio on the south east
Hmm.
area. So we're kind of different than most places. We have multiple projects that'll come on and come and go, and basically whenever they happen, we ramp up, and then whenever we are done with a project or something doesn't work out, we didn't just take the same staffing to another project and just ramp up to another thing. So we're a little different than most studios. There's a lot of hire and fire kind of mentality in like California and the game hubs in the different areas like Texas and
Hmm.
Seattle, but in Georgia where I'm at, it's like because there's not a lot over here, we actually try to cultivate talent and then keep them and not send them on their way if things don't work out.
Oh, it's great. And where are you located?
It's in Atlanta, Georgia, right
Atlanta,
now.
Georgia. Do you guys look
Hmm.
for students, experienced people? How's that work?
So for us, we'll hire anybody as long as they have potential. Like if a student comes out, like I mean, obviously we don't want to hire a student straight up out of while they're in school. But if they're out of school and they're ready to be employed, we'll just see if they have the aptitude, and we're willing to kind of grow them from there if we see this potential.
Okay, got it. So, I just lost my brain.
Oh, you're good, man.
The the question's really in my mind, like, what do you look for when somebody's coming in out of school? What are
Sure.
the things that define if somebody has potential or not? And one of the things that
Uh-huh.
I like to focus on is this idea of like, what are the triggers, the specific things that if you see it, that person has potential.
Sure, for sure. Specifically for what I look for, the project that I'm working on is Smite. So basically, the game that we work on there is a free to play game, and the way how we kind of monetize things is through skins, and that then allows for us to have a lot of variety of things we can do. So basically, we'll have skins that there's male characters, female characters, there's creatures like Cerberus, and then we'll have to have skins for each of those things. And like you can see kind of some of the stuff here on my portfolio, there's like different types of, we have like fantasy here, we have like sci-fi here, we'll have like creature-based stuff here. So the things that I look for, knowing that we're going to have such a wide range of things that we'll have to look for, is
Hmm.
just to see if someone can have like, can they do sci-fi? Can they, and by sci-fi I mean just broad strokes, because we can dial that in and teach you in-house how to get better at that. But
Yeah.
can they do some sort of sci-fi? Can they do some sort of creature work? Can they do some sort of like fantasy stuff? And if you can only do one of those, that's still okay as long as you do it well. But we look for a wide range, and then we look for just a technical aptitude where it's like when you look at something, it may not be the best, but you can see like they have an understanding of anatomy, or they have a good understanding of hard surface, or like basically if you can go to ArtStation and feel like obviously if you can do something that's at that level, like you're good to go. But if you can do something that you feel like is would stand out well enough, that's kind of what we look for. And it's just showing that it doesn't have to be something that's super advanced, right? It could be like something done super well that's really basic, but it
Hmm.
has to be done well. So it shows that you have like the technical chops, but design is also something I'm looking for as well, like design sense. A lot of times, I will like get a concept in game or from the character team, and as I'm making the in-game model, I'll start working on it and realizing things might not line up perfectly, or
Right.
things may not work well because this character's riding an already established rig, and the animations have to follow suit. So like when we have this new hip or this new shoulder pad, for instance, this it's like huge, and this guy has got his like a sword that rides on his arm like right here, this Asano guy. If there's a giant shoulder pad right here, that's going to penetrate in with the sword. So like, how would we solve for that if the concept artist kind of had something that looked like it would work well, but then when we go through all the animations, we realize, oh, there's penetration problems. So I would have to redesign things to make that work, but also feel consistent with the overall character. So like design sense for me is really important.
Got it.
So kind of all those things I look for.
And yeah, that's great. That's a lot. What tells you about the technical capacity? So if you're looking at somebody's work, are you thinking software, like they know Quixel or they know Substance? Or are you looking for,
No,
they just know a
I don't look at
specific
any of that
thing?
at all. Yeah, it's more of just like for the texturing stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
like Substance and Quixel make texturing like really easy.
Yeah,
I mean, because you just make masks and you just fill in some sliders and dial some things in, and that's pretty easy. The nuanced stuff, like adding color into things, and like that kind of like color theory and stuff like that, that's important for me. Seeing that, but the programs you use, I'm not really worried about that. I know that any program you use, you can get a good result with. It's more of like, do you understand just the fundamentals? I guess is what I'm getting at.
got it. Like
So I'll look for
PBR.
color. Yeah, so we don't do PBR on Smite specifically.
Mhm.
We have other projects where we do that, but we do spec gloss.
Okay.
So one of the things for our project, we still use Unreal 3, so it's pretty old, but we do our own materials for everything. So every time we make a character, we have to do custom materials, and we set up the shaders and everything. So we're kind of able to get some really good results from that. But yeah, PBR wise, we don't use PBR on this project specifically. Um, but definitely we just look for good color theory, things like that, design sense. If you're doing cloth on a character, does it look blobby or does it look like it's clean? It kind of like the sculptural ability of it. Does it feel like it's a material rather than it
Right.
having a material on it to tell the material type?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So not too Z-brushed, but somebody who's taken it past that to actually make it look like that's, canvas or jeans or,
Absolutely, man. And
yeah.
a big thing too that I'll see with students is, and like if I'm looking for something that will tell me like kind of like if they're in the ballpark and we can like work on them, like
Hmm.
aptitude stuff is just like when you're working on a sculpt, a lot of people will rush right to the tertiary level details
Right.
and they don't get the primaries and secondaries on point. And like when I'm looking for like a character, like a character artist, and I'm looking to see what their skill sets are, and I see like, okay, this guy understands primary and secondary reads. Like maybe his tertiary is not there, but if he can understand at least a good level of primary and secondary, I know that that's going to read really well at the distance. So I'm looking for that more than like a tertiary mastery of things.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And so it's not necessarily the software, but it's kind of, where somebody's head is at in terms of,
Yeah.
or how deep have they gone into the texturing process. So if we were to talk about, I don't know, something like, anatomy,
Yeah.
that's such a black hole for a lot of us,
Oof.
and I've certainly spent, a decade or two in that black hole, just
Oh yeah.
trying to figure things out. But how does somebody know when they know enough? How do they know when they're ready?
Oh yeah. So I'm a huge fan of anatomy. Like
Mhm.
at this, pretty much where I'm at, I'm the guy that like really hones in on that stuff and is like expects a certain level like quality wise. Whenever like we do a character, it's like okay, this is good enough. Like I'm like let me take a look at it and try to see if I can push some volumes and proportions and stuff around. But I don't mind if people like you don't have to be an all-star with anatomy, right? To be able to do the job because half the characters you'll see here don't even show like their bodies,
Mhm.
right? It's all like kind of paper doll system where there'll be a body underneath and you just do the clothing. Um, I would go in like if someone came in, they had just a base level of anatomy, like just the broad forms. You don't have to know where all the insertions and origin points and stuff are. You don't have to know all that, but if
Yeah.
you can do broad strokes of things, like here's the deltoid, here's a bicep, here's a tricep, here's a forearm. You don't have to know like the brachioradialis and how that all factors into how the forearm and where it twists with the radius and all the. You don't even know all that, but if you know the broad strokes, I can work on that stuff with you, like to say, hey, okay, this is a little off, and the reason why is because at this angle, your muscle, like the volume isn't correct at this angle, but we can work on that. So what I'll look for is just kind of not wrong looking anatomy, but it doesn't have to be so precise. Like it doesn't have to be like so granular.
Got it. And you have a sense of how do I say it? But like hierarchy of importance. Like, is there an area that's just a no go? Like, if they haven't mastered this area, then they're not
Mm,
quite there yet. Like, they're not beginner, but they're not
sure.
there yet. Like, you can't work with them yet until they get this. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah. So you mean broad strokes, or do you mean like just anatomy specifically, or just anything?
Well, let's do anatomy first, and then I'd love to open that up.
Yeah, so with the anatomy side of things, it's like I was saying, it's basically if I could just see that you can at least you hit the ballpark. Like your things might not be like the anatomy might not be so perfect and nuanced. That's okay as long as you can hit like the big broad strokes. Like if you like opened up How to Draw the Marvel Way or like any anatomy book by like Bridgman or something like that, you can just
Right.
do the kind of major volumes. Then that would be enough, and you can use reference. It's not like you have to know this stuff off the top of your head, or even know the names for any of this shit. You just need to be able to say, "Hey, can I actually make it look awesome?" Like based on a reference image. That would be enough for me to go with. But if I saw the anatomy was like just radically wrong, that would be something where I would kind of be a little concerned because I'd be like, well, there's plenty of reference out there, so why would this look so wrong if you could at least have some sort of like you can look at an example and try to just copy it. If you're not even getting that, then it's like, are you doing it out of your head, and is from what your head incorrect? So that would kind of be something that would be like a red flag to me.
Yeah.
But if I saw that things were like in the right places for the most part, but they're just off a little bit for whatever reason, that's stuff that I'd be looking for that I'd be okay with.
Got it. That makes sense to me. So how do you start characters now? Well, let's start with this at the end.
Yeah,
Do you use Marvelous Designer to get clothing? How deep do you get in terms of and expect
sure.
to get?
So, Marvelous, if I have a character that's heavy in like cloth and stuff, and I know that like I have some time to really like tweak it,
Yeah.
I will definitely use Marvelous for things where it's like especially like big volumed cloth that has like a lot of weight and it's kind of like a lot of like gravity would be affected by. I would definitely use Marvelous for those kind of things. But a lot of things for me, like if I have to go with speed, it pretty much boils down to that speed. If I have to have a deadline that's tighter, I'm going to go ZBrush all day because I like, I understand the anatomy of a fold, like how you
Hmm.
do like compression and how things will wrap around and how you can do thick to thins. Like I understand all that stuff. So for me, it's just like that's one thing I can use in a pinch to be able to just sculpt it out in with the time that I
Hmm.
have. But for if I have like extra time because we're in a good spot and I finished my last character on time, yeah, I'll definitely use Marvelous for things where I feel like it's going to get me the best result and it's not going to be something where because Marvelous is a lot of things where you have to like you might fight with it a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're like working on something, it's like okay, this way this dress on this character, it all like works together. It might be really hard to get working in Marvelous. I might just go right to Z. I might do Marvelous for half of it, and the part where it gets difficult, I might just do it in ZBrush and like merge the two together. Because for me, it would be just a thing where it's like I know I can handle like the ZBrush stuff like it's clay. I know there's no technical problems. That's me just learning how to like make sure it looks good.
Hmm.
Whereas with Marvelous, it's like it's easy for some things, but then for other things, it can be very complicated.
Oh, yeah. Right. And when it gets
Like if
complicated,
you're
it's
if
it's a whole new level.
yes, if I'm fighting the program to get what I want, then I'm going to ZBrush. Basically,
Yeah.
that's because I'm in a production environment, and it's like when you're a student and you're practicing, it's great to like push through problems and figure that stuff out. But when you're in a production environment, it's like they pay you to make an asset. They don't pay you to figure out how to make the asset while you're making the asset. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, how long do you usually have on a character? Let's say an average character, if I can say that.
It's about 4 weeks, I'd say. We usually have a process where I can go into my process via this if you wanted.
I'd love it. I'd love that. It'd be great. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Basically, the pipeline we have at on Smite is we have for a character we have like a rough process where we have like about a week, but definitely you want to spend less time if you can, but you have as long as a week to make a rough proxy mesh that then will get sent to a rigging artist, and they will weight it all up to the bones of the current character and just try to make sure that the animations are still consistent whenever you have this new model. So as they're working on that, I'll start my high poly model, and I'll have about a week to a week and a half, depending on how fast I got my rough done, to work on the high poly. And then at the 2-week checkpoint, my high poly should be done pretty much, and then I'll work on the low and then start the UVs. So I'll have that another week. So low with UVs is another week, and then the last week is going to be textures and materials. So I basically you get this big four-week chunk of time, and you kind of can move at your own pace. You just have 2 checkpoints, which are to get your rough proxy mesh to the rigging department and then your final model to the rigging department. Because we have to, everyone works together at the same time because this is a live environment process. It's not a game like, Horizon Zero Dawn or Doom or something where it's like a single player experience and like you have 2 years to make it, so the production milestones are all set, so it all works well. With this project, it's like it's a living, breathing thing. Like every 2 weeks, we do a new patch with 6 new characters. So it's we do a lot of stuff, and it's always in flux. So basically, I have to make sure that you do kind of a waterfall style of things. Like as I'm getting something done, then I pass it up to a guy like at midway through, and they're moving at the same time as I'm moving on the final, and they're moving on their final rig, and they pass it up to animation, and they're working on their base animations as I'm working on my like low poly. So it's like everyone's working together. You just have to make sure that it's like you pass things off at the right times.
Got it. And this is how the game.
How I'll do things is go ahead.
I was going to say, and this is how the game is monetized, right? So
absolutely,
kind of essential.
We make cool skins. We make new gods, and we do like events and stuff. So we'll do like NPCs in the game and stuff. So that's kind of how the free-to-play system works. You kind of give cool stuff to buy.
Cool.
But for as far as my pipeline with this stuff would go is, basically knowing that that's what I have to do to get stuff done, like timeline-wise, I would basically get my concept, and then I would start blocking. Like I don't like do the modeling straight into Max or like Maya. I'll go right into ZBrush and just start. Like I'll take an existing character that fits the proportions that I know is going to be what I need to fit for this guy. Like if there's an existing like skin and there's like a mech character or something like that, and it's like for one of our gods, and he has another mech skin, I will take that other mech skin knowing the proportional volumes are pretty consistent, and I'll work off from that in ZBrush, and then I'll Dynamesh stuff and then push things into place. And for me, it's important because like if I get a concept that may not come, like 2D is not necessarily translate into 3D well. You know what I mean? So basically, I always want to make sure that I take enough time to like kind of do a rough proxy sculpt that allows for me to make sure the volumes are all feeling really nice in 3D, and then I'll then make a final rough off from that. So I go, not all the guys like that are at work will do that kind of stuff. They're pretty much like, hey, they'll just follow a concept to a T. But I will make sure that the 3D feels really good. Even if it does, like once I do the 2D like version of it, and I'm like, man, something's not right here. Like maybe the chest needs to come out more. And the 2D version, it looks great, but like when I start seeing it and rotating around, it's wrong. I'll redesign some things if it feels like it's a better fit. Like it's not changing the concept, but it's plussing it, adding to it where it's not really working in 3D. I'll do that kind of stuff. So then after I have my proxy done like that, I will then pass it off to the rigging department, and then I will use that as my starting point to start making my final high poly.
Yeah.
And I don't really do a lot. I mean, I do a lot of like trim dynamic stuff and polishing for like hard surfacey kind of things. Like organic stuff is easy to do in ZBrush, but the hard surface stuff, that's the more difficult side of things.
Totally.
I usually get, if I have a timetable that's really fast, I will just sculpt straight up in ZBrush, and I won't even like retop it. I'll just use like the trims and stuff and polishes to make sure that everything feels pretty good. And it may not be the most prettiest model, but like whenever I bake it down, I know the low poly's there and I start doing textures, it'll look really nice. But if I have a lot of time, I'm gonna like, sculpt it into ZBrush, kind of get the lines for like any breaks or any seam lines, like bolts and stuff. I'll
Hmm.
get that in place, and then I'll probably retopologize it really quick and maybe like a hard surface package, and then bring it back into ZBrush after I've done that, so I know everything's clean.
Got it. And this
And
include.
then yeah, then I just go into
Yes,
then just
sir.
go into model, finish the low poly models, and then baking, texturing, and then just doing materials.
Okay. All right. And this 4 weeks is after concept, right?
Really use substance.
What's that? Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
is my
I
audio?
I was saying that I actually I don't even use I don't even use substance or I use Gdo a little bit,
Huh?
but I don't really use substance much on my work because it's spec gloss. I just kind of do Photoshop old school style.
Got it. But I was saying this 4 weeks is after the concept, right? So you get the concept, then you
Yes.
got your 4 weeks, and when you go through and you do your material, you do your model, you do your low res. How much of that is you focus on the high res versus how much of that is you focus on the texture?
Yeah, so I mean, like the thing is, one can help the other. It's kind of like hard to say sometimes because certain things are like, oh well, like there's a pattern on this character and it looks really cool, so I want to sculpt it in. It might be better just to do that in the texture actually because you don't know if the fidelity is going to read at a distance. You might want to change the
Exactly. Yeah.
scale a little bit. So there's a lot of things where it's like you have to also be tactical, which comes with just practice and time. So you might not know the right answer going in, but like if you've made like 10 characters, you might be like, yeah, you know what, maybe this pattern I should do later on because it'll just have a better bake. That you don't have to worry about bringing in a 40 million poly model character you
Hmm.
can't decimate because you've decimated, then it ruins that fidelity. There's things like that where there's time trade-offs. Um, but yeah, I would say that yeah, basically just being efficient is key with that kind of stuff.
Cool. All right. Now you've got in the top left of your
Yeah.
art station, there's a character who's got like a fur and barbarian. And this is one of the problems I know a lot of the students get into kind of early on. How do you
Sure.
get that fur? You know.
Oh, let me see if I can find a close-up view of the fur. So okay, so what I would do with this, basically I get a volume in place that
Hmm.
kind of is where my fur is going to be at. Like
Yeah.
as I'm building this character, he was like really high. So what I would do is I would like kind of like block in the top part, and then I would have like once that's kind of roughed in, I would decimate it and then bring it in as a proxy to give me my volumes. So I
Hmm.
make sure everything feels pretty cohesive. But I'm only working on a high fidelity version of maybe like a boot at a time or like the pants or whatever.
Oh,
But
okay.
for like the rest of the actual like this fur here, I would have a volume in place, and then I would probably break out like a couple of like strands, and I would just start like individually placing them from the bottom up. Like so, this would be like the first bit of fur,
Hmm.
and then I would have the next bit right here. So it's layered almost.
Yeah.
That way you'll have these volumes that kind of like feel right. And then after I've done that, there's probably gonna be little spots that don't feel fully fleshed in, and then I'll like dynamesh everything back all together, remesh it or Z remesh it, so I can actually have like I can go down to levels and go back up, and then I'll make a clone of that, and then Z remesh it, and then I'll get the details back from the decimated version, so that I can actually have fidelity going back and forth, and it's not going to be like a super dense mesh.
Hmm.
And then I'll then work off in the very top level, like adding like little stamps if I have it, or just like extra strokes with like damn standard or something.
Yeah.
But that way, it's like you're working on your primary reads first, and your secondary bits, and then you work on those tertiary, like tight detail lines after.
Got it. Great. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then when you're dealing with games, is it just cards?
Ooh, well, that depends on a lot of things. It depends on your engine for one. It depends on there's like opacity things like in text in the materials. There'll be like different types of shaders you can use. Like there's ones that'll be like masked versus transparent, and that like is an additional cost in game. Like a transparent texture is like a whole grayscale kind of situation. So like if you wanted to have cards, grayscale is awesome because you can actually have like softness to it, right? But if you do that, you're gonna have it's like a DXT5 texture, so it's gonna be something that's gonna like be more expensive texture-wise. So if you have that grayscale in your alpha, But if you have a masked version, which is just black and white, that's like the more cheap version of like a transparency. It's on or off, so it's gonna look kind of weird if you like kind of have cards and they're just on or off sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what you can work with bandwidth wise. But I tend to with Smite specifically, like I would do cards in like a more modern engine for sure because they just have the ability to make it look nice and it's not as expensive, and the engine can handle that. But Unreal 3, with the way we do things and the reads you're going to have the character for, it's usually at a distance. So I usually just kind of sculpt stuff. Like it's a big piece of mesh, and I'll just like kind of bake it out. But I'll try to be really intelligent about how I do it. I'll make sure that like maybe I'll do a decimation of it if it's going to be an area like, for instance, this bone, this would be attached to the leg bone.
Hmm.
100% probably. There might be a little bit of weighting that goes to the thigh, but the shin, this would be 100% to the shin for the most part, right? So I would just be like, okay, well I can just decimate this, and then make sure there's still some fidelity with like these silhouette breaks, and then just make sure it's low enough to be in game, and then I could just bake it 1-to-1.
Cool. And you did this actually in a class, which is
Yeah.
really kind of cool because at your level you're still learning. So what talk to me a little bit about like how you stay up to date, and how important that is if you
Oh,
find it
dude,
important.
it's funny you mentioned that because yeah, man, UArtsy, I was talking to Susan about trying to get into a class soon for like sculpting stuff.
Martin.
I'm a huge fan of, yeah, the Martin Canal,
Yeah.
absolutely, man. Yeah, I did this for a class. It was a mentorship with Grassetti and Glauco Longhi,
Yeah.
and basically, like I'm always trying to even yeah, I'm like an art director right now, but like I'm still learning. Like this whole career isn't something I think a lot of people think when you go into this career. It's like, how do I get to the finish line as
Hmm.
fast as possible, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's like there is no finish line. It is a lifestyle. It's a journey. Like you could just enjoy the process. Like you're gonna feel like I feel like I like am not that good. Like I feel like I need to get better every day. You know what I mean? And I don't think that like that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just that like stay humble, stay hungry. The techniques change, the software changes. There's always stuff to learn. Like after I learn how to get really good at sculpting, I got to learn how to get really good at like rendering, right? Like one of the biggest pitfalls I have in my portfolio is I'm not really good at displaying this stuff. I'm really bad at like I'm so busy always making stuff that I'm not good at like presenting stuff, you know? So like
Hmm.
that's one thing that I'll eventually have to get good at is getting better presentation, you know? But I'm always a fan of like thinking you should just keep learning because everything changes and you can never know enough. I'm really good at like males anatomy and stuff like that, but like females, I still need to work on that stuff. Like that's really hard. That's very subtle. There's a lot of like nuanced things. I like color theory is a whole big thing that plays into stuff, and that takes like there's so much to that. Lighting is huge, even though it doesn't seem like it matters too much to like if you're getting into the games and like character modeling and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
color theory is huge. Even it's super underrated for a lot of like texture stuff. It's king. Like making sure that you have a good harmony of things, balancing things out with colors in a subtle way is really important. Lighting, like understanding lighting, will allow for you to understand how form reads better, right? So
Totally.
the better
Yeah.
you are with forms, the more you can put that into your sculpt. So all that stuff is hand in hand. So I think like definitely like keep learning because, um, you know, I know there's tons of things that I need to get better at. And knowing yourself as an artist too is super important. That way you can know where to go, right?
Right.
Like being humble about that stuff, I think is super key.
That's cool. And that's it's neat that you bring up the texturing and color theory because I was just talking to the boot campers today about this. And one of the things that I've noticed is people get really good, especially like in Substance. They get really good at like the value variation, right? They can make something match.
Yeah.
But one of the things I see that people miss a lot is getting like chromatic variation, getting variation in the hue where something's bluer or
Yes.
yellow and whatnot. Like, what kind of things do you find are really important to make a texture sell and not look, CG or
Oof.
amateurish?
Oof. Oh man. You got some hard hitting questions, man. These aren't simple answer ones. So there's a lot of things that are important. Like obviously like saturation and like knowing how far to push things.
Hmm.
Like this character that I have right here, he's like more hand painted.
Yep.
and there's definitely a lot more saturation in here than maybe some of these other characters, like this one specifically. But knowing how far to push saturation in the game that he's going to be in, so that he doesn't stand out like a sore thumb, opposed to like this character over here. Like I pushed this as far as I could without it going too crazy, like World of Warcraft, compared to this guy, it's way more like muted down.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing kind of like how to balance things is really important, I think. Knowing kind of like color harmonies that work well together, like oranges, silvers, and like teals work really good. Like black, gold, and red work really good. Like there's certain like color things that work very nicely. And understanding how to like leverage that in a material is important too. Like, this character over here, like the idea was just make him like a guy that has like a celestial nature to him. So
Mm-hmm.
like he has like kind of like this galaxy moving around his body. So as I was getting to his arms, I was like, I need to have something that draws your eye to like, the business end of things, right? Like his hands are going to be shooting fireballs and like hitting you with them. So how do we draw attention to those areas? Because that's his weapon, right? So I'm like, how about if we like highlight the hand, right? And it's like, by highlighting it, it's like, well, what kind of highlight color will work well with like a purple, right? So like knowing how to like find a good, like if I just chose like an orange or like a deep blue, it might not look as nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like having a teal, it works well with the purple and it like blends nicely. And then it also pops out because I made sure it was a brighter type of teal, right? So it's like a big kind of like, hey, look at me kind of place,
Yeah.
So all those things are important, and knowing where to lead your eye, that's another huge thing, man. Like a lot of times if you like try to look at stuff and you desaturate it, it's like having nice color blocks, like the 70-30 rule, where it's like 70% should be like rest, but 30% should be like your details,
Mm-hmm.
Like this character has a lot of details right here, specifically up close. Like if I get up on his armor and stuff, there's a lot of ornate stuff going on. But at a macro read, like at a distance, it's just gray, right?
Right.
But then up close, there's a micro detail that goes on. So knowing how to like not have too much noise is important, but also knowing like how to like use that kind of like frequency detail to like lead you in areas, and then using color to do that as well. Like a lot of games like that are top down, like Diablo and like League of Legends, right? They'll have the whole lower part of a character. They'll be like desaturated more and they'll be darker. You'll have like a top-down gradient map, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point of all that is to get you to look at the focal point, which is the upper body, not the lower body.
Got it.
So like little tricks like that can help lead your eye to where it's about leading the eye. A lot of this stuff is.
Cool.
And then focal points, of course, like leading your eye to the focal points in the character.
Like the hands.
Yep. Any like hands, weapons, anything that's going to move or be interesting, anything that's going to be like a standout thing, you want to like help lead the eye to those areas and let the rest of it be supplemental and have those areas be the focal points.
How important do you think it is for people to focus on the face for sculpting?
Oh, so it depends on what kind of game you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
but the face is really important. It's a make or break thing, man. Like we had one moment where there was like a skin that went out and like the face was just a little off. It looked really good, but it was just a little bit off. And the fans went ballistic online. They were like doing memes and stuff. Like they were just like,
no.
like, I had to take it back and actually just adjust it because it was like, look, there's too much flack, and it was like it wasn't even wrong. It wasn't even that bad. It was like a little bit of like something didn't feel right about it. Like it was a little too feminine for a face for a male character or something like that.
Yeah.
The cheekbones were at the right angle. The nose didn't like feel right. Like it was put too small maybe. Like the eyes had a little bit too much like AO on it, so it felt like makeup. Things like that. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but because everyone every day looks at other faces, like you have to come correct with those kind of areas. Faces are one of like you can fudge a body up a little bit and it'll be kind of acceptable.
Yeah.
But faces, they're the most scrutinized things I think in any medium, like games or film, whatever. That's why you have like the whole uncanny valley stuff, right? It's like you can probably get away with most of it, but the minute you see those faces, and you can just tell right now if it's wrong or right.
Yeah.
So it's really important. I think faces are really important. You don't have to know the anatomy of a face fully, like the muscles and how like all this the radial stuff works. That's more for deformation and animation, I think. But just understanding the forms There's a book that's really good at this stuff. It's called Anatomy for Sculptors,
Oh man, those guys
and pretty
are
much,
awesome. I know them.
dude, like, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. They totally didn't. They're not coming at it from a place of like, what's the anatomy, like anatomically correct. They're like, what are the forms looking like
Mm-hmm.
for a sculptor, right?
Yep.
That's the most important stuff. Like understanding what the forms are and how those relationships work together. That's the important stuff. I mean, the anatomy, like, it's helpful and it's great to know the names because it can help guide you if you're looking for reference online. But how that anatomy creates forms and like how fat pads affect that stuff and how like things might be just like if you shift the angle like a hair, it'll like make the lighting change, and that will cause a whole different reaction from a response from a viewer or a player. Like all that stuff is super. That's the real meat and potatoes, man. Is the form reads.
Mm. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. What about things like hands and feet?
So hands and feet, at least, I mean, it depends on what kind of game, I mean, they have to look good enough, but
Hmm.
like, on a game like Smite, where it's like dudes running around, they're fighting each other's magic effects and all this stuff, like, even when you're trying to buy a character, like, just make it look like he's got four fingers and a thumb, and don't go too crazy off that, and I think you'll be okay. But a game like maybe like, I don't know, maybe one of the Mortal Kombat games or something like that, or even one of the more cinematic kind of games like Until Dawn or something like that. Those games, you got to be right with those. Like you have to make, because there might be a cinematic moment where you see someone's foot or their hand, and it's got, or even Uncharted is probably a better example. It's easier to understand. Like they zoom in on a camera beat, like where they're looking at like the character's like hand and his gun, and he's ready to fire, and they want to get a
Hmm.
big cinematic kind of feel there.
Yeah,
Then they're going to pan down the arm, and they look at the hand, and the gun's ready. If that hand looks messed up, like it ruins the illusion, right?
that makes
So
sense.
some games it'll be really important, I think, but other games like League of Legends, it's not going to matter. World of Warcraft, that you just make it look like a good enough hand. It doesn't have to be a masterful hand.
Well, and that makes sense for when you're in the industry. But one of the things that's always on my mind is there seems to be a difference between what it takes to get into the industry and
Hmm.
versus what you do when you're in the industry. So for somebody who's
Sure.
wanting to get in, and they're just looking, they just want to, what do I do in that portfolio where it's like it just triggers somebody somewhere.
Yeah.
This is like, for example, the guy you guys hired is Matthew Gilmeister, right? And he'd been,
Oh yeah, yeah. He just got on Paladins. Dope.
yep, absolutely
That's
right.
cool, man.
And it was his
Yeah.
character that he worked on, and he was kind of he took it this little bit further than he'd taken stuff before, and it just caught somebody's attention, right? And so now he
Yep.
can
Yep.
his process is going to vary versus what he was doing in the boot camp, but like in terms of the face and in terms of what you do on a character,
Yeah.
what's the thing that you need to do to become a candidate for the job, not get the job, but just become a
Mm.
candidate, you know,
Sure.
from your
Let me
mind.
just say this right out the gate.
Yeah,
Like, basically, all the learning is going to be on the job.
got it.
Everything that gets you to the job is just to get you to the job. But like
Great.
once you get in there, like you're at the back at zero. Like you gotta learn from the bottom up because there's so much stuff. Yeah, and not to like dissuade anybody. Like it's a wonderful experience, like because it's awesome. And it's exciting to learn and grow. But once you get on the job, everything is just it's just different, and it's good because they're paying you to get better. So it's like it's all good. But as far as like what to get there, it's basically just try to have, like, for me, like I was saying, like a range design. But the thing is, you don't have to have stuff perfect. It just can't look wrong, I guess, is the best way to describe. Like if I look at anything and it's like that just looks off, it's immediately like, all right, well, it just looks wrong. So like if they're putting stuff out and they know it looks wrong, like then maybe they'll do that on the job, right?
Hmm.
So it's like you don't have to have like 60 characters. You can have one really good character that shows that you know how to do the thing, as long as it's done like at a quality bar that's worthy of going in a game. Like as long as you can see something that you make and like that could go in a game and it feels good, people will look at you, I think, as far as like as a potential candidate for sure.
Got
I
it.
mean, the more you have, the better, right? But
Yeah.
like, just make sure that like if you have more, it's just people are going to look for chinks in your armor, right?
Hmm.
They're going to look for the quality first, and they've seen, okay, cool, this all looks pretty good. They seem to get a good handle on stuff. Then they're going to say, okay, now where are they messing up? What are the, they'll do the broad read, and they'll say, is this person, can he do the work, right? It's like, okay, yeah, let's good, cool. So now where is it wrong? And they'll start looking. They won't even look for the good stuff anymore. They'll just get the broad read that it's good, and they'll start looking for like, okay, what does he not understand then? And then see how that applies to the job. Like, okay, well, we need someone that understands color theory, and if he's got great modeling skills, and this kind of looks good from presentation standpoint. Maybe Marmoset's doing that with all the lighting. Like, what does it look like with the colors in this actual character? Okay, maybe that's like there's something wrong there. Like, we'll start looking for those things
Hmm.
so we can know like how to like get you to it's like the next level, right? The first read is, okay, can the character, does it look interesting? Cool, it hits that mark. Now, does it look like there's any technical thing that's wrong? Cool, it doesn't look like it's technically wrong. Then it's like, okay, now is there anything, like you start like getting like more granular as to like what could be improved in the character. But I mean, not every place is going to be as crazy as that, but I think that's kind of the mindset. Like, whenever I show the guys at work, like, hey, here's a candidate, like, that's the first thing we'll start saying, hey, you can do the job, yeah. But then it's like, but then where from that mindset does he start falling apart? And is it worth bringing him on because maybe he's not good at this or that,
Hmm.
Even after you get to a level where it's like he's clearly competent.
Got it. I love that. So all the learning starting afterwards, but assuming you've got a team, you've got people that are going to
Yeah.
help you. Not
Oh, and
necessarily.
that's definitely it.
Yeah.
Like you will, like, on the job, like, anytime someone hires you, right? It's not like they're just. I mean, yeah, there's a contractual obligation, and you're getting paid, and you're making assets, but like they want you to get better too, and you want to, because they know the better you get, the better their stuff they get from you that goes in the game. It's all like symbiotic, right? It's like, I help you, and then you're going to help the game in turn because your skill level has gone up. So everyone, it's all about like, growth and helping. Like, I mean, at least where I'm at, like, everyone is just trying to look out for each other. There used to be a mindset back in the day when like there wasn't like no one. Like, I come from like the era of like 2004, 2003,
Hmm.
like that kind of level of art. And it's like back then there was no like ZBrush had just started. There was like no there. I think maybe Gnomon Workshop had just started. Maybe
Hmm.
there
Yeah.
was like none of this online presence. There was no Gumroad. There was like nothing. Like, I would like be at school, man. And I would be like, if I saw like someone like Bobo the Seal or somebody like you know um these older cats that are doing stuff, they would have like a wireframe, just a wireframe model, right? And it was like the minute you saw that wireframe, you're like, oh my god, I found the holy grail.
Right.
Holy crap, like, this is how you make wireframes, like, this is the best. And it sounds so silly because people these days will ask for wires, and it's like kind of irrelevant at this point unless you
Hmm.
like are trying to figure out if they can make an animatable mesh.
Right.
But back then it was so crazy. So it was like, there was a mindset back then where it was like, oh man, trade secrets, can't tell. Like, my job is reliant upon these trade secrets. So I will not share this information with you because you will take my job, right? There was that kind of mindset
Yeah.
back in the day.
I remember that.
And
I remember
yeah,
seeing
yeah, it's
Bay Rates
oh
wireframes
yeah, yeah,
and it
yeah,
was
yeah,
like, oh my god, and he was in Wings back then, and it was just like, this
yeah,
is how
yeah.
you do the eye to
That
the
guy's,
nose to the face to the
yep.
mouth.
It was Spiral something, right? Was his name or something?
Yeah,
It was the online.
Spiraloid, I
Yeah, yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that's it, man. Yep, yep. But yeah, so back then it was like that. But these days, it's not like that. There's so many jobs. I mean, like, I know that we were saying like it's comparable to like being on a football team because it's like, you have these teams, you have to have the best of the best.
Mm-hmm.
But once you're in there, like, it's family. Everyone's trying to look out for each other. Everyone's trying to help each other grow. Like, I am all about, like, just last night I was like, there was a guy that was working on like a torso for one of the characters, and he's kind of new. He's like a junior guy,
Yeah.
and I was like, hey man, give me your model tonight. All right, like, after work, I'll take a look at it and I'll just like, get it right. And I just, till like 1 in the morning, I was working on the model just to make sure that
Damn.
his stuff was going to look good. I gave him before and afters. I give him some crits and stuff. So like, I spend a lot of my free time just to make sure that he's going to be getting the right path.
That's awesome. That's amazing, and that speaks to like your guys' goal of just building the talent there. Because I'm sure,
Oh yeah.
like, what is it? Joseph Drust is down and around your area, and there's some Ubisoft, if I remember correctly, but there can't be a ton of talent built in down there.
There is not. There's a couple of studios down here. And it's crazy because they have this whole like Georgia like grant that allows you to make a whole bunch of. That's why you see a lot of these films, like Marvel
Yep.
films and stuff
Yep.
like that. You'll see the George at the very end, because like it's essentially like becoming like Hollywood 2.0, because there's all these like tax breaks for the industry, entertainment industry, whether it be like video games or like film. So it's crazy to me that not a lot of places have come over here, and I think it's just the mindset is like that California mindset is, hey, you're probably gonna get a job and you might get fired, but it's okay, because like I'm gonna go right across the street and work at that next studio that's right over there, and like
Yeah.
2 years from now when I leave that project, I'm gonna go over there. There's a lot of bounce around that
Yeah.
happens in like the Cali scene, and I think when people like see, oh, I want to go to Georgia, it's like, oh, well, where am I going to bounce to if it doesn't work out? And it's not like that here, because a lot of places it's like stability is kind of a thing here.
Hmm.
But it's weird to me. It hasn't picked up yet, but there are definitely a lot of talented people down here. You just don't really hear about them because they're not out here flexing on like Facebook or on ArtStation as much and stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because there's people who are out there flexing. Yeah, there's definitely an issue of
Yep.
that in California because you got to flex because
You got to, because it's your job, right? Like if you want to get another like if you want to get that next studio after your project is over, if you want to leave for another place, you got to do that stuff, right? Just to be like have your name out there, and I totally
totally.
get it.
Yeah, but then in some places, like Joseph Drust, is just crazy skilled, but he flew under
Oh
the
yeah,
under the
oh yeah,
radar for just a long time. It wasn't a big deal. He's a very humble guy, very
yep.
humble.
Oh,
So
he's super talented. Yeah,
I know, right? God, I was so happy when Pixelogic hired him because he's like the
yep,
perfect guy to take them into character, deeper.
yeah.
So, what do you love about living in Atlanta?
I mean, there's a lot to do here. The area I live is in this place called Alpharetta. It's kind of like a suburb. It's just like a nicer kind of area. Like, I have like a kid and stuff like that, so like I'm not partying and stuff like that. I like to go out every now and then, but I'm more of a guy that kind of just wants to go home, play with my kid, and then whenever she's asleep, I get back to art. So as far as the Atlanta area, there's a lot to do, and I like that option, but I kind of just like the place I'm at is more of the reason why I'm here.
Got it. How old's your girl?
She is 4. She's about to turn 5
Oh,
next month.
that's like
She's the
pure
best.
love, right? Like just pure love
Oh
phase.
yeah,
My boy just
I'm
turned
I'm
5.
doing this from home. Oh yeah, yeah, good stuff, man. I'm doing this from home, and like I have the door locked to my office because I'm like she comes in and she just like wants to sit in your lap, and I'm like, I've gotten you. She actually will use the Cintiq to like color and
Yeah,
stuff. I've gotten
yeah,
used to kind of like learning how to have her in my like on my lap, but
yeah.
I'm like cradled around her and able to still keep working while she's sitting there playing with something. It looks really weird.
I believe it, but I totally understand. So how does the game the game career can be, people have this picture, it's intense and long hours. So how does that
Hmm.
work when you have family? How do you make that work? Are they supportive of it?
You have to. I mean, so like where I'm at, it's like basically, it's really nice because it's like me working extra hours is literally me volunteering. It's a lifestyle, like I was saying. Like I'm either helping someone after hours or I'm studying something to get better at something I'm interested in. It's not like I have to. Like with my career at Hi-Rez, like I do art direction. So basically, it's like I just make sure that everyone is. I make sure there's no roadblocks. I make sure that if anyone needs to know where this needs to go, I just help. Hey, here's what we need to make. Here's how we do it. If you have any questions, come grab me and I'll help you out. But like, I try to let people do their jobs. I try to not get in the way of that stuff. I know some people are like very, you know, Dr. Claw with that shit. They want to just own everything, and just really just be in control. I'm very much not like that. I like to facilitate and help other people take power and be in control of themselves, but be able to kind of like give them direction. So after hours, if someone's like they're not at a good place, or they don't understand something, I'll take something if I want to and help them get in a better direction for the next day. But that's not ever expected of me. Basically we do like 40-hour, it's 40 hours a week at Hi-Rez, and basically, if for some reason you have to work from home, everyone's cool with that. If there's some reason you have to take a day off, all that matters. Like everyone's cool with it, like being flexible with things, but all that matters is at the end of the day, when rigging needs their models done, they get their checkpoints in place, and then whenever we have our final cutoff for the character to make sure it goes out in a live patch, that has to be done. So as long as everyone is making sure that they got their stuff done by those 3 checkpoints, it's pretty much like, hey, whatever you want to do, man, just get it done. There's a lot of trust. But you have to like earn it. Obviously, if people are, messing around, they get, we'll say, hey, dude, we have to be a little more careful on this stuff. But like, yeah, we just make sure people can have as much flexibility for their personal life as possible, but then also they're responsible to be done by certain days. So if you want to work at night to get your stuff done, that's cool. Like we have a guy, Chris Cooner, he's a beast, and his work is top notch, and a lot of that comes from him just really putting in those extra hours. He's already got, he's super talented to begin with, so he's pretty fast, but he also is super diligent, and he doesn't accept anything other than the best. So like he'll just keep working and making sure he might put in like 50 hours on a 40-hour week to make sure that he gets that quality bar that he is happy with.
That's awesome. Got it.
Yeah. So basically, it's like after hours for me is like that's voluntary. I can't see myself doing it. I wanted to make comic books when I was a kid. Like that's where my design sense and my 2D stuff comes from.
Yeah.
But I realized that games are like a much better, more money making kind of industry, and I had a passion for it at the time, so I went into it. And after going into it, I realized this is what I was made for. Like I can't imagine myself doing anything else. Like all my time, like I allocate right back into some sort of form of game stuff, whether it be design or anatomy or something that translates back into this.
That's great. And you've been doing this, what I think you said, since 2004. So that was that was basic. Wasn't that with silicone graphics machines? Still, or did it get to the PC? Did mine get to PC? I can't remember how long I've been doing this, but I got in right when the computers went from $100,000 to $2,000.
So I think it was the 2000 era. Yeah. I don't remember having to put in 100. It was definitely an era. Like I mean, when I was going to school, we had it was Max 3, I think.
Okay, got it.
Max
Yeah.
3. It wasn't like Studio Max. It wasn't like you're using numbers and vector, just kind of Cartesian coordinate numbers to put in to create things. It wasn't that level. But there was interfaces, but it was very rudimentary. There wasn't anything sophisticated. There was barely any plugins. Like there was no ZBrush back then. And when I was going to school, the engine we used was GTK Radiant, which was like the Quake 3 editor, which is just rough to work with. But yeah.
Awesome. All right, man. This has been absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed this. We can probably wrap this up. I think I'm sure you've got advice that you give people that are looking to get into the industry. If there's 1 or 2 things that you've seen in your career make a difference, and what would be really great is one thing not to do, one thing that's a surefire. This is.
I can tell you one thing for sure, and it's crazy because it's not even related to art.
Got it.
The biggest thing that I see from people these days is ego. Yeah. It's crazy. It's you'll have, and it's I don't know. I'm guessing the reason is for a lot of people, they'll come in and they'll be the best of their class, right?
Exactly. I've seen that.
I was the best of my class when I graduated way back in the day, right? And it's they come in and you're like a big fish in a small pond where you're from, and you got the job, maybe your friends haven't or whatever, but then you come in and you forget that now you're in the major leagues now. So you might have been the best at where you were at. But you have to also understand that there's guys this one guy I work with, Trevor Henningsen. He's amazing, super talented artist. He's been in the industry for 20 years. 20 years. The guy, I don't know how he's been in the industry that long. He looks like he's 15. He's like a vampire or some shit. But he's super humble, great guy. He's been at tons of places, like NC Soft. He's been at this place down in some places in Texas, some places over here in Atlanta. He's been in the industry for forever, and he's got a great attitude. And it's you'd never know, right? And it's so you got these guys that come in and they're coming right out of school and they're so just full of themselves and it can be in a good way, but you can kind of feel it sometimes when someone's too cocky about things, and they'll just be that way about things. And then they're talking to this guy, and the guy's just humble, not saying anything, but he's got 20 years of experience, right? So he's just it just rubs people the wrong way when you act like that. That's one of the biggest things I've seen. People coming in just being too cocky and too arrogant, and not realizing that, like, staying humble is the way to go, I think. Because this, like I said, this is a journey. It's not like a destination that you're trying to hit.
Yeah.
You're always trying to hit the destination, but it's the journey is what matters. So, like, be a good person. Like, be willing to help your team. Whenever I hire someone, can I get a beer with you, right, after work? Like, I have to sit next to you all the time? Does your attitude suck? Are you a negative person or a positive person, right? Like, that stuff is like getting your foot in the door with your art is really important. But when they bring you on for an on-site interview, really they're saying, do you work well in this environment? Like, do you fit the culture of the studio? And that's really important, and nobody grooms for that. Nobody, like, I rarely see some. It's usually you just have a good charismatic person who come in and they're all right usually. But, like, a lot of us as artists, we're like introverted people or just like kind of shy and stuff, and that's totally cool. But, like, having that kind of like personal skill set it's like soft skills is what they call it. Having that kind of like worked on a little bit would give you a big leg up, I think, with most people in the industry when they're looking for jobs.
That's cool. That's great,
especially for new people.
Yeah, that's great to point out too, because I mean, and that's not just games. Like, I remember my brother-in-law went and interviewed over at Google, and
Yeah.
they took him out, at night to, and it was all part of the deal. It's like, can we work with you? Can we hang with you? Can we, get a beer with you?
Absolutely. Like, your family, when you get into, like, that's how I look at it, at least. Like when I try to hire people, I'm like, look, we have like 18 character artists just on Smite. 18 guys. It's crazy.
Oh, wow, that's a lot. That's great.
Because we're dumping out like 6 skins a patch. A patch is every 2 weeks. So we're at least a month. We're making 12 characters a month.
Oh, wow.
It's insane. So having like that many people, it's like you're gonna have all these different personality types. So we want to make sure that everyone that comes in has a good attitude, because if one person comes in and they have a bad attitude, that can propagate down to the rest of the team and just kind of make everyone negative. You know what I mean? You can infect other people. So we want to make sure we have good people. They're, talented, but they're also just great people, and they're like fun to work with, and they're excited to work, and they're not cocky or like, it's all about growth and making the best art, but having a good time while doing it.
Do you look for people, and this kind of goes to the ego, the cocky thing. Do you look for people who know the latest software, or does that not factor into it?
I mean, with the project I'm on, like I said, it's Unreal 3, so it's kind of archaic. So I don't specifically look for that, but at the same time, it's like, that's definitely a good thing to be up on the top of the software stuff. But I look for fundamentals, really. I just look for design, color theory. I look for anatomy. I look for just like the reads of a character, like from a distance, does it look good versus up close? Like, is there too much noise? Like, I'm purely looking for fundamentals, because any of that technology stuff, you can learn that stuff. Like, I don't know Substance right now, but I bet you if I just I like opened up a Substance, training thing, and I come out a month later, I'll be ready to go.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And there's so much to learn, but you can't learn it all. And you have to stay focused.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
there's talent trees in this thing, right?
Yes.
you have so many points you can allocate in which area, so you gotta just make sure you focus on what you're focusing on.
I love that. I love that idea of talent trees. So Rashid was asking, what's the culture like at Hi-Rez? So if you could compare like what the culture where you're at now versus other things, that might give people a sense of like what it means to fit in, to connect.
Sure. So I've been at Hi-Rez for a long time. So I've only worked at one other place in Atlanta, Tripwire Interactive, and that was also startup. But those guys are great. The culture at Hi-Rez is it's very iterative, is the word we like to use, because things can like change on a dime, and it could be design sense changes. It could be things like I was saying, where like we design a character in concept. When I said design, I meant like actual game design. But in concept design, if we have like, someone made some really cool looking model, and they have like some things that are wrong with it, like a shoulder pads here, or there's a shin guard here that's going to penetrate somewhere. You have to be able to think fast and be flexible and come up with creative solutions, like right then and there, to figure out how to make it work. So iterative stuff is very important, being able to be flexible and creativity. That's also a big thing I look out for with people is creativity.
Right.
Being able to think on their feet and be creative with solutions. But we do that all the time at work. And aside from that, it's like on the Smite team, it's a pretty well-oiled machine at this point. Like we've been doing Smite for like 5 years, maybe 6 years now. So it's been around, and we have kind of been really good at mitigating problems and making sure we can boil it down to a really streamlined process.
Yeah.
So workflow-wise, we just, we have our deadlines, and we just hit those deadlines, and we're pretty much good to go. But if something needs to change, like, hey, there's a character needs to have a skin that comes out, or there's some, like, we just did some sort of contractual obligation with another company, and we're going to have a skin for them out, we have to, like, be flexible and change things up. So again, iteration there, and just the team is like I said, we try to look for good people, because it's all about just like having a good time when you're doing this stuff. Like we're fortunate enough to be able to do something we love. A lot of people are not in that position, so trying to leverage that and really just get people that you have a good time with is what I look for. So culture-wise, on the character team, that's definitely the way we roll.
That's awesome. All right, man. That is really great. I think we got one more question, and then we can call it a day. I really appreciate the time. Gregory's asking if a person's portfolio follows a certain theme, like horror or dramatic, how do you infer that their skill can translate to art themes at Hi-Rez?
So that's tough, because like it's almost like typecasting yourself. It's like if you see like movies and you see like, hey, this guy, like Adam Sandler, right? Dude's funny. He's a funny guy, right? He's always in funny movies. He's not going to be in a serious movie because he's always in funny movies. If you have something where you put yourself in a position where you're always like, I only do horror. It's like, one, I don't know if I can trust that you can do anything but horror, right? And it's like, why would you not want to try others? I would also say to myself, like, why does this person not want to try other things? Is he so comfortable with horror that he doesn't want to improve his skills? Stuff like that. So I would say diversify a little bit, I mean, you can definitely see, like, if someone has if there's a guy like worked on like a Resident Evil or like a Silent Hill, or, like professional kind of level stuff, you'd be like, oh wow, this guy's super talented. Like, he probably could do the work. But you would definitely art test then, right? If we saw that you had potential, and we didn't know if, like, okay, is this guy a one-trick pony and he can only do horror? Let's make sure we just give him an art test and say, hey, make this thing and let's see what you do with it. So we know if you can make it or not, and then go from there. That's generally the way I would see it, is art testing. If we're not 100% sure.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, great. Glad we got that. All right. Well, I should get this one question in with Edison, because Edison is very talented modeling. He's working in an architectural house, and he wants to. He wants to work in games. Do previous careers, like, hey, I'm an architect or something like that, do they even count in the conversation? Is it part of it? How do you segue it, or what do you think on
Absolutely. But it would be relevant to the discipline you're looking for going into. So as an architecture guy, right? Environment art, all day. Right? I mean, as far as characters, you may still have the chops. I mean, like, it may just be a total, like, hey, I just want to try this out, and you have the potential. But, like, the fact that you've used 3D software, well, if it's like CAD-based stuff, architecture, I'm not sure if you're talking about drafting or CAD-based stuff, like 2D stuff. All that stuff does translate to some degree, right? Like, there's an understanding of design when you do that kind of stuff. There's an understanding of, like, good forms and how that will fit into a 3D space, right? So I would say specifically in that instance, you're looking at more of an environment art kind of position you'd want to apply to. And, there's nothing wrong with applying at a position that's lower and your goal is to be something else. When I first started this, I was an environment artist, and I always wanted to do character art. So I would just do concepts and just keep working on my character stuff on the side. And I eventually went from an environment artist all the way to an art director from a character side of things.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you guys for the questions and for being here and for being part of this. Ben, man, have an awesome day. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom.
I appreciate it, man. I hope you guys have a good one.
All right, take care.
Take care.